Welcome back to another story that will stay with you long after you hear it. If you love stories that inspire, challenge, and touch the heart, you're in the right place. Make sure to sit back, relax, and let this one unfold because it is not just about money, but about what truly matters when the curtain falls on all of life's luxuries. It all begins with a man named Richard. Richard was what most people would call a self-made millionaire. He had built his fortune from scratch, starting out as a teenager who worked long hours in a small electronics repair shop. Over the years, through determination, discipline, and smart investments, he went from barely affording rent to owning multiple properties, running a thriving tech company, and enjoying every luxury you could imagine. But with wealth came an invisible wall. Richard was respected, even admired, but he was not always loved. Friends kept their distance, family ties became strained with jealousy, and relationships often felt transactional. Despite this, there was one person who had always been close to him in the simplest and most genuine way possible. Her name was Maria, his maid. She had been with him for over 10 years, ever since his first small house before the mansions, the cars, and the private jets. Maria was in her mid-40s, a woman of humble background who worked tirelessly to support her 2 children after her husband had passed away. She cleaned, she cooked, she took care of the little details that Richard rarely noticed but always depended on. What made her different from everyone else was that she never treated him like a millionaire. To her, he was just Richard, the man whose shirts needed ironing, whose messy kitchen needed scrubbing, and whose late-night cravings often led her to prepare a quick snack even when she was exhausted. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and phone calls, Richard noticed Maria sitting quietly at the corner of the kitchen table. She looked tired, her hands rough from years of hard work. Out of impulse, maybe out of guilt or a desire to do something nice, he reached into his wallet and handed her his black credit card. He said with a smile, "Take this, Maria. Buy yourself something nice. No limits. Get whatever you want." At first, Maria was shocked. She shook her head, refusing. "No, sir, I cannot take this. That card could buy a house, a car, maybe even my whole neighborhood." But Richard insisted. "You've been with me for years, Maria. You've never asked me for anything. Just take it. Get something you truly want. You deserve it." Reluctantly, Maria accepted the card. She thanked him softly, tears almost forming in her eyes, and tucked it away carefully in her small handbag. Richard expected her to maybe go on a shopping spree, buy designer clothes, jewelry, maybe even something extravagant to finally taste the luxuries she had always been surrounded by but could never afford. Part of him even felt excited, curious to see how she would spend it. The next day passed, and Maria didn't mention the card. Neither did Richard. But after 2 days, she approached him quietly and returned the card. "Here you go, sir. Thank you for trusting me with this." Richard, with a playful grin, asked, "So, what did you buy?" Her answer was simple. "Just a few things." Curious, Richard decided to check his statement later that evening. He expected to see transactions from luxury boutiques, electronics stores, or maybe even travel bookings. Instead, what he saw stopped him cold. The first transaction was at a supermarket. A few $100s spent on groceries. Then a pharmacy, where she bought medicines. Then a small clothing store, children's section. A modest purchase, nowhere near the limit. And finally, a payment to a local hospital. That was it. At first, he didn't understand. Why would Maria use his card for these things when she could have had anything? Why spend it on such simple, almost mundane needs? So he asked her, "Maria, I gave you that card so you could finally enjoy yourself. You could have gone to Paris, bought a diamond necklace, gotten yourself the life of luxury. Why just groceries and hospital bills?" Maria looked at him with gentle eyes, the kind of eyes that carried decades of struggle and quiet strength. "Sir, I don't need diamonds. I don't need fancy trips. My son has been very sick. He needed medicine. My daughter's shoes had holes. The groceries were for the week so they wouldn't go to bed hungry. That's all I wanted. To see them smile, to see them well. That is luxury for me." Her words pierced his heart. Richard had spent years chasing more, buying more, living in excess, yet he often felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Maria, with her small purchases, had found joy in giving her children comfort and health. She had taken his card, a symbol of endless material wealth, and turned it into a tool of love and sacrifice. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He walked through his massive house filled with things he rarely used, rooms untouched, closets full of clothes with tags still hanging, cars he barely drove. For the first time, he felt the weight of it all. It wasn't pride anymore, it was emptiness. And then he thought of Maria's son, lying in a hospital bed, her daughter walking proudly with new shoes, her family sharing a warm meal. Those small moments, funded by his card, had brought her more happiness than all his millions ever brought him. The next morning, Richard made a decision. He called Maria and asked to meet her children. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. When he met them, he saw the truth with his own eyes. The boy was frail but smiling, clutching his mother's hand. The girl, shy but cheerful, showed him her new shoes as if they were treasures. In that moment, Richard's heart broke, not out of pity, but out of realization. He realized he had been blind to what truly mattered. He had built an empire but forgotten to build connections. He had wealth but no warmth, possessions but no purpose. Maria, in her quiet humility, had shown him that true wealth was not in money but in love, in family, in giving. Over the weeks that followed, Richard began to change. He didn't stop being a businessman, but he stopped being only a businessman. He started funding local schools, paying hospital bills for children in need, setting up scholarships. He made sure Maria's children had every opportunity to study, to grow, to thrive. And with each act of giving, he felt lighter, freer, more human. Maria, of course, continued to work for him, but now their relationship was different. There was no longer just an employer and a maid. There was respect, gratitude, and a bond built on something money could never buy. Years later, when Richard looked back on his life, he didn't remember the cars, the mansions, or the luxury trips. He remembered that moment when Maria gave back his card and told him she had spent it on her children. That was the turning point, the crack in his hardened heart that let the light in. And so, the story reminds us all of one powerful truth. Money can buy things, but love gives life meaning. Sometimes, the richest person is not the one with the most in their bank account, but the one whose family is fed, whose children are cared for, and whose heart is full. So the next time you measure wealth, remember Maria's groceries, the medicine, the shoes, and the hospital bill. Because in those simple purchases was a richness that no millionaire could ever buy. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, remember to share it with someone who needs a reminder that life is more than luxury. It's about love, kindness, and the people we hold dear.